We've been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
From the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas, this is the Get Ready for the Future show, answering your questions about all things finance. We are glad to have you here. We are here to educate and give you some practical action items that will send you towards a path of discovering, protecting, and sharing true financial independence. It's what we're about here at the firm, GenWealth Financial Advisors, and also on the radio show and all of our resources that we have for you at getreadyforthefuture.com. Head over there to find out some more things you can do to accelerate your path to financial independence. My name is Scott Inman. Along with me today is Tim Key, who's my partner here in the West Little Rock office, where we meet with clients every day and work with them on their path to financial independence. It is more than just investments, and we're going to get into that today with some of our questions, some decision points that folks who've sent in questions today are looking to make. And Tim, that's really what it is. You know, we think about the decisions we make financially can impact our path to financial independence for years and maybe even decades. If we make the wrong one, it sets us back. If we make the right one, it can accelerate things.
No, definitely. I think usually making the wrong decision has a bigger impact than making right decisions, because it is harder to recover from those sometimes. You know, if you get yourself into debt and you're trying to pay yourself out of debt and, you're paying 15, 20% interest, obviously the banks are some of the tallest buildings in town for a reason. And that's because, they have the market on the loans. And so, getting out of debt, making those right decisions about investing in your 401ks and, making your income and keeping your income to yourself instead of giving it back to the banks is going to be the best use and get you to that financial independence.
Yeah, and when we talk about bad decisions, we know because we've made them, right? So don't beat yourself up over them. Everybody makes them. But
we've all done it.
Let's make better ones in the future. So let's get right into our questions. Our first question today is from Claudia from Little Rock, and she writes, I'm debt-free and have $800,000 in my 401k. I'm 61 years old. And before I reach 62, I want to know if I can retire and get Social Security income. Should I be able to live comfortably without working at all? Or should I work part-time and still collect Social Security plus $4,000 each month from my 401k? I don't know what to do and if I can retire. Claudia, you're not alone. These are questions and really confusion in her voice. I can hear it, right? That you just don't know if I have enough to retire, when should I claim Social Security, how the two interact, am I going to need to work part-time? Let me say, first of all, that working through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process answers these questions. We do it every day. Claudia's not alone. Clients come in here all the time, and really those are some of the primary questions they're going to ask us in a client meeting room. And the Ready to Retire process builds a plan for you, Claudia, that shows you, taking into account how much you have saved, your $800,000 in your 401k, taking into account how much income you're going to need and want, and building a monthly income plan that incorporates your assets as income, your Social Security as income, and if needed, a part-time job. We could even show you how much you might need to earn. But what we don't know here, Tim, is how much Claudia needs and wants. She's throwing some numbers in here, right? Collecting Social Security, drawing $4,000 each month from the 401k, but we don't know how much of that she needs. Where are you getting that number, Claudia? That's the first question I have for you, the $4,000. Because if you're debt-free, do you need that for other expenses, or is this what you just want? Defining what required income is and desired income is and coming up with that monthly number is one of the first steps. So I would do that. But there's a lot in here, Tim, that we need to kind of address too. She's asking about Social Security, potentially taking it 62. Let's walk down that path.
Yeah, 62 is the earliest you can take it. So if she's 61, trying to retire now, you're not going to be able to draw Social Security until you're age 62. And really at that point, again, going through the planning process will really help identify whether that's the wise decision to make by taking it at age 62, because it is a 30% reduction from that full retirement age benefit of 67. So, life expectancy and things like that play a big factor in whether you should take it early or delay that. But if you are retiring and want to take it at 62, we definitely can. The other thing is you could take it at 60 if you have a survivor's benefit. So if you were married and your husband passed away, then there is that opportunity potentially that you could go ahead and start taking that survivor's benefit now. But that would be the only time you could take it prior to age 62. One good thing about this is she is debt-free, and so the necessary income in retirement would be much lower potentially for her. But again, we have a lot of questions on what she's going to be doing in retirement. Is she trying to replace her current income? Those types of things, and being able to kind of walk through that process, make sure that those guaranteed income sources are being received through Social Security to pay the regular bills, the utilities, the insurance, things like that. But then making sure that she also has, whether it's $4,000 a month from the 401k, that is kind of an arbitrary number, but what is that she's trying to actually do and what her desired income is.
Yeah, so we know, Claudia, if you're 61, you were born after 1960. Everybody that was born after 1960 has a full retirement age of 67. But that doesn't mean, as Tim's already pointed out, that you have to wait that long to take it. But it is reduced on a monthly basis every month you choose to take it earlier. And every month you actually choose to take it later than 67, it will grow up until age 70. So that's the wheelhouse, right? Earliest is 62, the latest is 70. Now, you can wait later, but there's no reason to wait. That's as big as the check is going to get. So determining when to layer that in is important. And then let's address the part-time work, Tim, because that matters too. The first thing we have to say is you need to build a plan to determine if you're going to need to work, because it does sound like Claudia doesn't know it doesn't sound like she really wants to work. She's trying to figure out if she's going to need to work and delay taking those distributions from her 401k. So going through the planning process will help you determine if you're going to need to work. And if you are going to need to work, it is something you need to be very careful about in taking Social Security early and working.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they first go into retirement, they think, I don't want to work. But they have to retire to something. They have to have something that's going to occupy their time. And so we do see a lot of folks that want to go back and do some part-time things. But the income limit for working part-time and still drawing Social Security before your full retirement age, like Scott said, is age 67 for any of us that are born 1960 or after, is only $22,320 this year, or $1,860 a month. If you exceed that on an annual basis and you're drawing Social Security, you're going to have to repay $1 for every $2 of earned income above that limit. So if you're going to make $40,000 or $50,000 just working part-time, that's going to cause you to have to pay back a lot of that Social Security and then recover that. So in that case, it probably doesn't make sense to start Social Security, but really kind of sitting down and planning it out and seeing whether you have to work part-time or not is going to be your first choice. But a lot of people do end up going back and doing something just to kind of occupy their time. They miss the folks they're working with, things like that. But again, sitting down and knowing whether that's going to be required or not is something we need to do.
And let's talk about the $4,000 a month, and we can dive into this for a little bit before we have to go to the next question. But are two questions about that, Claudia. Are you assuming you're going to get $4,000 a month in spendable income? Because if it's coming from the 401k and it's not a Roth 401k, those are pre-tax dollars that are going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. So if you're taking out $4,000, you're going to have to send the government a percentage of that depending on where your tax bracket lands. So we have to figure the taxation implications of your withdrawals as well. And then the other thing, are you going to leave that flat? Are you considering that you're going to maybe need more down the line? If you start at $4,000 and that's too much, then it's going to be harder to give yourself raises down the line, and you're going to want those because of cost of living rising over a potentially long retirement. If you're only 61 years old, there's a really good chance you could live 25, maybe even 30 years, so you're going to need to raise your income. You wouldn't work at a single job likely for 30 years and never get a pay raise. You're not going to want to retire for 30 years and not get one either. So those are a couple things to consider, and we do know those are one of the raising your income is a reflection of inflation, which is one of the three big risks of retirement for everyone. You have to find ways to raise your income to battle inflation risk. You also have to be able to manage your investment strategy in a way that it avoids sequence of return risks. When you think about the 401k, Tim, and I think about the 401k, we say all the time, it's a great accumulation vehicle. It's a great growth vehicle, but it's going to probably be in a good significant portion of stock in the 401k or stock type funds. And if the market goes down 20% like it did in 2022 while Claudia's taken out her $4,000 a month, that's a problem.
Definitely is. And we do say 401ks are great accumulators. Start putting that money in, start investing, and you take advantage of dollar cost averaging. But you also have the suffering of dollar cost averaging when you're pulling money out and the market's down. It does cause your money to your balance to go down much more quickly than normal. So 401ks, usually the investments inside there, if you're familiar with those, you're limited on your choices. Most of them are good growth vehicles, but they are not good stable funds usually unless you just get into the standard interest, and that's not the best place to have most of your money. Interest rates are usually going to be lower than inflation, so you're going to be losing buying power along the way. So we definitely need to get that money into some investments that will be good more long-term for her and be able to preserve some of those and have some conservative investments on the early end while you still have those growth investments on the outside.
And that final risk, Claudia, is longevity risk. You want to make sure that you have guaranteed income sources that you can't outlive that are going to pay for your basic lifestyle like Social Security. It may make sense to take a look once the planning has taken place to use some assets to create more guaranteed income. And then the other part of that, you never want to run to zero. We have clients, I think we had some in earlier this week, who talked about, hey, I just want my last check to bounce, right? I want to spend it until I die, but we don't know when you're going to pass away. So there always has to be more assets available to produce income. You can't run it dry unless you know your exact date of death. Claudia, thanks for the question. Hope it was helpful to you, and I hope it was helpful to anybody else who's in Claudia's shape. Closing in on retirement, you have no idea about how your assets are going to turn into income, when to take Social Security, should I work part-time? Those are questions that the GenWealth Ready to Retire process can help you answer, and we'd love to help you get started. Just call us toll-free, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526 to sit down with a GenWealth financial advisor and have a discussion about these things and whatever else is on your mind about retirement. Next up, from YouTube, our next question. My wife and I are expecting our first child in December, and we are looking into life insurance. She doesn't have an IRA yet, but I was looking into opening her a Roth IRA and contributing to it on her behalf. I already have one myself, but I've also been wanting to contribute to the brokerage account to grow our investments faster with a bit more liquidity than a retirement account. That said, do you recommend prioritizing maxing both IRAs before making contributions to a brokerage account? We'll get to that part of the question in just a minute, but the first part there, it kind of seemed like it was a question about life insurance to start, but then we pivoted to the IRA. I don't know how those are connected in the question, but life insurance, let's talk a little bit about that. It might be more difficult if you don't have any to get that for your wife while she's pregnant. But life insurance is big right here as you're starting a family. Your wife and you probably need to have a life insurance policy. We are big proponents at GenWealth of term life insurance, spending as little premium as possible to get the biggest death benefit as possible. We also know, Tim, that you're only likely going to need insurance for a period of time, and this is the beginning for them starting a family.
Absolutely. If you're wanting to get term life insurance, which is what we definitely recommend, and you're in your mid to late 20s, early 30s, and you're healthy, that is probably one of the best times to get it, and you can get a 20, 25, 30-year term policy that will really carry you through most of your working life. And so if you are doing the right things, the idea is that you're stacking up money in your retirement accounts, maybe some brokerage accounts, you're paying down debt. So when you get to that age of 60 or so, or even in your mid-50s or early 50s, and you're in a good position financially, life insurance really is no longer necessary. You've already got the house paid off, the kids are out doing their own thing, whatever it might look like. So we really don't believe that when the life insurance is more expensive during those 50s and 60s that you really need it. So being able to secure life insurance when you're young, when you're healthy, is the way to go. Again, Scott said that with your wife being pregnant, it might be more difficult right now, or the premiums might be higher, that type of thing, just because of pregnancy. So it might be a little late to get life insurance for her, but it's definitely something you should look into, especially if you're the primary earner. That's another thing. We really want to see life insurance replace the earnings that we're going to be coming into the household from whoever might pass away. So there's a lot of things to look into there, and some factors that we can look at to see what types of life insurance, how much life insurance someone might need.
All right, so the second part of the question, and really the main part of his question, is prioritizing IRAs or Roth IRAs over brokerage. Before we get to that part on deciding that, because of the circumstances you're in here with a pregnant wife, she's probably going to be missing some work, don't know what the benefits are from her job. Is she going to go back to work? We would definitely recommend making sure you stack up some cash before you get to the retirement or before you add to the retirement. Stack up enough cash to make sure you're covered for any emergencies, potential complications, potential missed work time that can come with this pregnancy. If your wife does, in fact, work, potential income loss, if she doesn't have an extended maternity policy, it would just be good to have a good cash stockpile here of at least a couple of months extra of expenses beyond what we hope you already have. And if you got that covered, then we talk about prioritizing the investment accounts. And our easy answer here is yes to the Roth. Max out both Roths. And here's why. There's really no downside to doing this. In a brokerage account, he mentioned, Tim, the desire to have something a little more liquid, because and I understand this, and I think this is a good mentality to have. You put it into your retirement account, such as a Roth IRA, you think about not touching it until 59 and a half, but you actually can.
Exactly. The mindset should be, if it goes into anything with IRA at the end of it, whether it's Roth or traditional, it should stay there until retirement. But Roth dollars, because you are giving them after-tax money, and you'll never be have to pay another dime of tax on the earnings of that. But the actual principal balance that you invest into a Roth is available to pull out at any time without penalty. So the Roth is a little bit more flexible, definitely more flexible than just a traditional IRA. So that principal balance is available to pull out in case you need it. So again, we would like you to try to keep your hands off if it goes into the Roth, so that it can be there and grow for the long term. And then the brokerage account would be the next place to go. Stack that up, and once you have your cash in your money market account and have that emergency fund, and you've maxed out your IRAs, then move on to the brokerage account so you can start building up some real serious wealth and really potentially have a much earlier retirement than most.
Yeah, I think ideally that's where I'm getting to there on the Roth IRA. Max them both out, and then hopefully you still can run even harder at it and put it into that brokerage account. A brokerage account is great for, and I say brokerage, it doesn't have to be brokerage. It's a non-retirement investment account. It could actually be an advisory account if you have a significant amount in there as well. So don't get hung up on the brokerage. But in a non-retirement account, you can actually invest for more near-term or intermediate goals, and maybe not go as hard on the risk side as you might in a Roth IRA, knowing you're putting that money away for decades potentially. And we don't even know their ages, but we're assuming if they're just starting a family, they've got a long time till retirement. But I think that's what I like about the non-retirement account twofold. You can get into it a lot easier, maybe even invest it in a way that you're anticipating touching it long before retirement. And then the other thing is, it's the next outlet when you've maxed out your retirement plans, and it is taxed differently, but not necessarily more severely, because if you don't, outside of the Roth, which is of course going to have tax-free income for you in retirement, in your 401ks and your traditional IRAs, it's going to be taxed as ordinary income. You're going to pay as you go to some degree on the non-retirement account, but capital gains rates may be a little more favorable to you than income tax rates. So you might actually have a good diversification of taxation, if you will.
Yeah, capital gains rates are taxed more favorably today than just ordinary income. So anything you pull out of a traditional IRA is going to be taxed as ordinary income. Every dollar is taxed, versus something coming out of a brokerage or an advisory non-retirement type of an account where you've got capital gains. And capital gains rates can be as low as 0% based on your income, so and as high as 20%. So it is a more favorable way to invest. And Again, kind of knowing anytime we have someone that comes in with non-retirement money, it's really what's your time frame? Is it going to be something you want to buy a house in 5 years and have that down payment? So we wouldn't go quite as aggressive in that case. Or is it something like, I don't really plan on ever needing to touch this until retirement, but maybe I want to retire at 55 instead of 60 or something like that. It gives you a place that you can have access to money without penalty, because if you do pull out money from retirement before 59 and a half, there are some situations where we can do that without penalty. But in most cases, you're going to wait till 59 and a half before you start drawing those funds out.
We thank you so much for that question. We're going to call it our question of the week, and we are going to give you a Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being named the question of the week. To claim it, just send an email to us, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Here's the tumbler, by the way. I'll get that up right there nice. For video audience. I try to use it every week. It's a great tumbler, and you can have one for free if you just send an email to claim it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. And if you have questions for our show, you can call or text them in to the number 501-381-5228. Wherever you're watching or listening to us, just send that in. You can leave a voicemail if you want to leave your voicemail there, or you can actually just text to that number as well. Send us your question. We'd love to hear them, and we'd love to answer them on the air like we just did that answer for our YouTube viewer. Next up, it's Garrett from Memphis. The presidential debate has me thinking no matter who wins, they're going to keep spending money. How does government spending play into inflation, and what can I do to help ease the effect of it on me? Well, I can't believe that was your takeaway from the presidential debate. I thought a lot of things about the presidential debate that weren't that, but I get it. Government spending, the cat is out of the bag. It is not likely to go down. Now, he mentions the spending of the government playing into inflation. I think there is some connection there because inflation was first in the most recent bout of high inflation. We saw interest rates rise by the Federal Reserve, and that means the government is paying more on that debt, right? So their interest is way up. So it's kind of I say the inflation was really more the causation there. I think the biggest problem that government spending has on our personal finances, on our economy, is that ultimately someday taxes are going to have to go up, because we mentioned the government spending, and you're right. Again, Garrett is absolutely right. They're going to keep spending money. Both parties love to do that. And once you start a government program, it's very hard to back out on it, right? Very, very hard to tamp down on it. So if spending is going to continue to increase, the only way to battle that is to bring in more revenue. And we've got some great graphs here to talk about from First Trust, who we love following, Brian Westbury, the chief economist at First Trust. And Tim, the point here is that the only way, and I'm going to hesitate to even say out of this, we're never going to get out of this, but the only way to ease it is for the government to raise taxes.
Right. I think we do have to ease it. We can't, we're at $35 trillion in national debt, and it's increasing every day, but we do have to get control of it, or, it's kind of like, I know I need to go to the doctor, but I don't go until I have a heart attack. You don't want something to break that's going to cause them to have to make a quick decision. You want them to be able to make some decisions along the way that may ease this. And really the only two things you do have is to reduce spending, and there might be some areas you can reduce it, which are going to hurt. But the other one is to raise taxes and raise the revenue. And that's probably more likely the route that they're going to go. But the majority of federal spending is around national defense, Social Security, and Medicare. And now one of the biggest problems is the net interest. And if you're watching online, you'll actually see the chart that kind of shows the percentages of where these current expenses rank as far as federal spending. The other category is relatively a small part, but definitely an area that we can definitely cut back. But the net interest, because right now we are issuing more debt, and that debt is at a higher interest rate than it was just a few years ago. And so that is causing a more and more of a burden as far as the interest that's being paid on our debt as our overall federal spending. And that is expected to continue to increase as interest rates remain at a higher level for longer. And so the only way we can really bring this up and cover this is to continue to increase taxes, increase the revenue that's coming in, and so that we don't continue to have to borrow more and increase our national debt.
When you think about, it is important to have some historical comparison here. When you think about $35 trillion in debt, record high debt, same as record high stock market, it is relative in the sense that the value of the dollar in 2024 is different than the value of the dollar in years past. So that part is relative. And where we're getting to is the other graph here. If we take a look at net interest as a percentage of total federal revenues, well, it's high and it's at near historic highs, but it's not like we haven't been here before. If you take a look at the middle of that graph, and the 80s were bad, right? The 80s as a percentage, the net interest was over 15% of total federal revenues. We're there again, and it is projected to stay a little bit level, if not even a little bit down. If you look at the red lines there, 2024 is this year, but going out to 2033, it's not actually expected to grow. It's actually expected to decrease a little bit. So that, I think, maybe gives me a little reassurance that we are at least not in a historically first time, right? We have been here before. We have been, and if you see that chart and you're looking at the 80s and early 90s, that's when we had crazy high interest rates. And, they were paying higher interest rates on the debts back then. As the interest rates came down, they were able to refinance that debt, if you will, by new bonds and things like that. So we got to a pretty good place where it was less than 10% of the overall federal revenues. But now it's climbing, and there's really no end in sight as far as it coming back down. And we have been there before. We've been able to take care of our debt, and we don't expect right now to default on any of that or have the government do that. But it is a strain on the American people, and it's something where to be able to actually start paying this down instead of having to continue to increase the borrowing and is to balance that budget, and hopefully interest rates will come down a little bit. They can lock those lower rates in again, maybe for a longer period of time, and be able to ease that burden on the country as far as the interest debt that we're paying. And Garrett, really, when it comes to your question, what can I do? This is where you need to focus, because it is not about the economy. It's about your economy. All of this stuff we talked about is worrisome, but there's not a lot we can do other than vote, right? And as you've already mentioned, whoever you vote for is probably going to keep spending money. So your economy. Well, we think you can work hard and look for promotions, look for ways to increase your wages. When it comes to battling inflation, that's the way to do it. If prices go up, but you're making more money and you're keeping debt low and you have margin in your life where you have disposable income, that's one way to attack it in the current environment, and then continue to use a huge portion of your disposable income to invest in asset classes that historically have outpaced inflation. Don't get too conservative. Don't look for that 5% interest on a CD unless it's money you need in 12 months. Look for your long-term future in things like equities and real estate, which have outpaced inflation historically. Leave it in there for the long term and have assets in retirement. I was going to add, inflation's driven more toward how much money the government prints rather than how much they actually spend. And that's really what happened during COVID when they passed out all the money to everybody. People had more, the people spent more on less goods, and that drove up the inflation. All right, our final question. We have just a few minutes left on the show. Isaiah emails us. I have two adult sons. One is 31 and single, the other 29 and married. They will each be receiving an inheritance of about $250,000 very soon. I am fortunate that they do at least take into consideration my advice when it comes to financial matters. What should I advise them to do with that? Well, I'm glad that they do take your advice, and here's a great opportunity. We talked at the top of the show, Tim, about action steps and decisions about finances that can send you in one of two paths. It can negatively impact your path to financial independence or positively impact your path to financial independence. And these two kids here, 31 and 29, I call them kids. You know I'm getting old if I'm saying that. They have a great opportunity inheriting $250,000 each to make some huge decisions that will accelerate their path to financial independence. So, could be very likely, though, Tim, that the advice is different for each of them given their circumstances, because there's not a one-size-fits-all answer here. No, that's so true. Each one may, thankfully, they're listening to your advice. Again, my 17 and 21-year-old don't always hear it. So glad they take your advice and education and wisdom into those kids, even at 29 and 31, is a great thing. But yeah, each one could be in a much different stage. One could have student loan debt. Other
in a house, renting. There's so many different factors that go into it as far as, it's not a cookie cutter answer as far as this is what they should do. And we do have to find out, what is their current debt? What do they have saved? What do they have going into retirement at this point? And then, is this money coming from an IRA, or is this going to be some after-tax money that's being inherited? Because there's some different rules around when they're going to have to take that money out and what the $250,000 will become if it has to be taxed. And so there's a lot of different questions that we have to ask to get answers to make a real good some direction on what needs to be done.
It's very likely that it's not all going to go to the same place, right? There may be some debt that gets attacked and eliminated here, some savings that needs to be established, but let's just assume out of the $250,000 that they're able to invest $100,000 of it. That's not even half, right? So this is a very conservative estimate, because hopefully we'd be able to put more than that back into investments and let it grow. But let's say, hey, after all these things are looked at, debt, savings, other options that there may be taking some of that money away. What if we saved $100,000 and we invested it for 30 years, and we're going to assume an 8% rate of return? And the reason we do that is historically that's around what the stock market or the S&P 500 has done since its inception, maybe a little higher than that, but let's be very conservative and say 8%. If they take that $100,000 and invest it for 30 years at an 8% rate of return, they'll end up with $1,006,000. So they're a millionaire. $100,000 at 29 and 31, 30 years later, they're a millionaire. And we have clients that have a very comfortable retirement with $1 million. But it is worth pointing out that at 29 and 31, 30 years into the future, will it be enough? Because inflation eats away at your purchasing power. And I think kids today need to understand that. Being a millionaire doesn't carry with it the tag that it used to, right? I mean, when we were kids, $1 million was a great retirement.
That was huge.
It's still a pretty solid retirement, especially in the state of Arkansas where we work with most of our clients. But is it going to be enough for today's 30-year-old?
And it's not going to be. But it's going to be a huge help and a huge benefit to someone to be able to set aside $100,000 at age 30 right now and just let that continue to grow and complement everything else that they're doing through their lifetime to get to retirement. I think being able to help kids is one of the biggest things that we love to be able to do. Just provide education, get them off on the right start, help them get out of debt, or whatever that plan is. Being able to work with young people and get them started going in the right direction so that when they're in their 50s or 60s, they're set instead of looking back and wishing you had done a lot of things differently. So being able to take care of your kids and things like that. But some of this, where's that money coming from? Is there a way to honor that person with the money and different things? I think there's a lot goes into this.
Yeah, what would they want? And even some possibility there to have fun with it. We're not saying take all 250 and don't have any fun at all, right? There is a chance there to be able to do something fun with it. So lots of options. I would say to finish that up, Isaiah, get your kids in to see a financial advisor. An advisor can help them to prioritize their goals and make the right decisions with that upcoming inheritance. You heard the final bell. It is time for our final thoughts, and Tim, will start with you.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on this last question here. I think a lot of it goes back to I'm glad your kids listen to you and get advice from you, but there's a lot of parents out there that wish their kids would listen to them or would like to hear the same thing that they're telling them from someone else. And so, we work with a lot of our clients' kids, educating them, getting them started, and we'd love to do that with young folks. So reach out to the office and get with a financial advisor that can just provide education about what you need to do at your time in life.
Well, we had some good questions today. So, I think back to the decision points, the action steps, taking the right steps to financial independence. We had one from Claudia who's about to retire, wondering if she could take a certain amount out of her 401k. Should she claim Social Security early? Is she going to have to work part-time? We thought about the question about life insurance and prioritizing the Roth IRA over a non-retirement account. All of these questions, and then of course this latest one about inheritance and how to set that in the right places for your future. If you need help with any financial decision, I'm going to leave you with this. Call us have a conversation with the GenWealth financial advisor. 866-653-PLAN. It's 866-653-7526. Don't go it alone. Get some help in making your financial decisions. And that's all the time we have for this week's show. It's a pleasure to have you with us, whether you're watching online on YouTube or you're listening on radio or podcast. Please join us again next week. And if you have a question, call or text it to us, 501-381-5228. We'll see you next week.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.